somebody you can trust. He's somebody that you know is always going to be there. He's not going to turn his back.
And for Mo, it was the clients. In order to understand the hoe, went out to the field and did the work, right? Who does that? He did. I was interviewing for future attorneys to join CRLA at Hastings Law School. Somewhere around in the middle of the day, in comes this guy. It was Mo. And he had read about it. I don't know that he understood that much about what we were. So I start to describe it, and there's this smile that would light a sky. He just physically reacted so strongly, so positively, so impassionately. And so it was like, okay, I'm hiring him. I don't know who else we're hiring, but he's going to be one of them.
Mo, once he saw an injustice, was determined to do something about it. The short-handled hoe was clearly an injustice to the farm workers, physically, even mentally.
When he started with working for CRLA, we would brainstorm, we'd play pool, drink beer, chit-chat. You know, what do you think? How do you think we can best serve the farm workers? And during those conversations, the cortito issue came up. I told Mo, if you really want to help the farm workers, you get rid of the cortito. He said, okay, let's see if we can do something about it, all right?
And so he gathered the facts. And then he looked to see what theories could be used to bring a lawsuit. We had general laws speaking to safety of workers in California through the workers' compensation laws and so on, but nothing specifically covering the short-handled hoe.
So I went to the library, and there's no law on cortitos. No, I couldn't find anything. Finally, I found one regulation.
And he called and he said, "What about this idea? We could bring an action under the Industrial Welfare Code that this is an unsafe hand tool." And it was brilliant. It was brilliant. None of us had ever thought of that way of going about it.
He says, "Do you have someone who is willing to basically testify or be a plaintiff or something like that?" And I said, "Yeah, let me talk to Sebastian Carmona." Okay, because I knew him from way back.
I met Sebastian Carmona, the client who told me about it, after I'd been a lawyer for 6 months. I was like a brand new lawyer.
I said, in order for you to really get the sense of injustice, you have to go and experience it yourself.
And I remember thinking to myself, I don't have to go to the field to know it's hard to bend over all day to stoop labor.
Piece of cake, he said. I can do this all day.
And by noon, I remember lying in the shade of my car, wishing noon would never end.
Right. And so finally, I think about 10 or 15 minutes later, he stands up and says, "Oh, my aching back."
And by the end of the day, I mean, the pain was so unbelievable, but I knew in my head and my heart that I have to do something to get rid of the short hoe.
And I said, now you know. Now you know what the farmers go through. I'm glad that you're suffering this pain, because now you can relate all the way to the pain of the farm workers.
The first thing we did was took a survey comparing farm workers in Soledad and farm workers over in the San Joaquin Valley, and we learned that the incidence of permanent, totally disabling back problems was about twice as high where they use the short-handled hoe as where they don't. We then spoke to a number of doctors, and every one of them said there's no question that ruins people's back, bending over all day. What we want to do is completely have the hoe banned as a dangerous tool.
The 10 doctors' affidavits in which they painted the picture. Here's an x-ray of a 41-year-old farm worker. Here's an x-ray of a 75-year-old man. They're the same. That what this is doing is aging by 30 years or more, and it's irreversible.
That's an example of the kind of work that was really CRLA at its best, because Mo gathered the documentation and was able to ban the short-handled hoe.
Ultimately, We petitioned with the California Supreme Court.
He had earned the trust of the union and of the farm workers even before he filed the lawsuit. So there was no question in our mind that he was going to be successful in handling that lawsuit.
The Supreme Court's normally the place where like the best 70, 60-year-old lawyers go. And I was like 28, 29, and I had long hair. And I remember going in there and intimidated to hell. Here are like 7 justices sitting up there who, and I've been working on this case now for 5 years, and they're going to decide, are we out of court or are we in court?
Tell me about his performance a little bit more. Were you pleased? Were you sitting back? Did you feel you had to jump in?
Oh, I was totally relaxed. I knew Mo had it, and he did. The court clearly liked him. He had prepared. He was ready. He was eloquent. Achieving the ban on the short-handled hoe was an enormous achievement, one of the best that CRLA ever achieved.
It represented so much. It was not just the fact that they could use a long-handled hoe. It was really like going for that big fight for dignity of workers. So it was a very symbolic victory for farm workers, I think, and for CRLA. So to all of the Chavistas out there, when you think of someone like Mo Jourdain, of somebody that used all of his intelligence and the strength of his personality and his patience and his persistence to win this lawsuit, to get rid of the short-handled hoe, just remember that. This is what the Si Se Puede spirit is about. This is what the Cesar Chavez clubs are about. It's about using whatever we have to help those that are in need. That's what the Si Se Puede spirit is. Against all odds, against all obstacles, we can do it. Si Se Puede.
In the Diana case, we both found to our surprise years later that it's a seminal case in education handbooks and treatises, and it's been written about enormously. It's actually a critically important case in the whole education field on these issues of how children are classified on almost any standard.
I've always thought of Diana as one of the great cases that we handled, just because it affected so many children, and it's so important for the progress of any group. When I was a youngster, I attended for several years a segregated school. I was the only boy in our segregated class that graduated from high school. Why? It was a combination. One, children do often what's expected of them, and society really didn't expect much of them. They thought that we would all, at age 16, quit high school and work in the orange groves. Secondly, the families were poor, so they welcomed, in a way, the money that those boys could bring into the family.
The Diana case was born from when we formed an education task force early on, and we gathered statistics. And one of the statistics was this overrepresentation of Spanish surname in mentally retarded classes across California in enormous numbers, 12,500 at that point in time. And if you multiply that over any number of years, you're talking hundreds of thousands of children who aren't retarded being placed in classes where they have no chance of learning and are being mislabeled and laughed at, and all of the horrible things that happen from that.
One morning, a mother comes in with her daughter, and she refused to go to school, and she cries and cries and cries and doesn't want to go. And I'm come here to see if you can, what advice you can give me. I said, let me ask her. So then I asked her, I said, why don't you want to go to school? And then she said, because I don't learn anything. So I said, I'll tell you what, when Mo comes in, I will tell him about your story. And then Mo says, all right, how about if you and I go to the school? I said, let's go. He was like, let's do it. Yeah, and I like that from Mo.
Well, first I talked to the other kids in the class, and it turns out they all seemed pretty normal to me. Half of them spoke a little English. None of them spoke only English, and 3 or 4 spoke only Spanish, and yet they were tested in English. And it was determined when they scored low on the test that they were mentally retarded.
Mo said, how come you put these children in the school? And then Wendell said, oh, because the county psychiatrist comes in and tests all the kids. And then the county psychiatrist recommends, that we place them in this room. Why? Because they didn't pass the test.
There were two real problems, either independently would have caused the result. One is exactly, if you can imagine a Spanish-speaking child being given an IQ test in English and graded and assigned, you can't believe it, can you? And the second was the tests are culturally biased. So they were standardized on Tennessee white children, and so you take a group that's migrated, or is in a farm labor camp, and you give this test, and you're not measuring anything relevant to where they should be placed in school.
And I talked to the parents, and the parents were surprised. And I would ask the parents, I said, did you know that your child was in special class? That's what they call it, special class. You know that he was in special class? And he says, oh yeah, we know. We signed the paper to the school that said, yes, we allow them to put in special classes. I said, do you know what special classes mean? And then they said, yeah, that my kid is special, is gifted. And that they want to put him in this special class because he's gifted. And I'm very proud of that. I said, it's the opposite. Your kid they're telling him that he's mentally retarded. Is your kid mentally retarded? Hell no. What are you talking about? I said, yeah, the school, I talked to the principal, I talked to the board, and they all said that, yeah, they're slow, that your kids are slow. He's not slow. And then they got angry. And every parent that I talked to, the same thing. Can you imagine those kids with the stigma the rest of their lives? Like mentally retarded? Mo says, we need a psychiatrist or psychologist that can conduct the test in Spanish.
And the lawyers in Salinas started investigating. We met, and I met with the principal of the school district, and he agreed that if we had them tested bilingually by a certified, a California teacher-certified professional psychiatrist, he would accept the results. We did that.
Mo told me, hey, good news. CRLA is paying for them to fly here on a certain day, and it's going to be a Saturday and Sunday.
We had a fellow come up from San Diego, if I remember correctly. He tested all the children. None of the children had the IQ that was required to be in an EMR class, with a possible exception of one that was borderline. The little girl that from whence the complaint came, it came out practically at a genius level, if I remember correctly, once tested bilingually.
So we filed a lawsuit in federal court saying the kids labeled mentally retarded were being denied an equal educational opportunity because they were given classes for mentally retarded people and they were regular kids. And we won. And so the district had to retest every kid who had been labeled mentally retarded. The state had to retest every kid who had been mentally retarded, labeled mentally retarded. And that meant, I'm not sure, 500,000 kids had to be tested, and they had to remove 50,000 kids who had been erroneously labeled mentally retarded when they weren't.
Meanwhile, however, we had made it into a statewide lawsuit because the Department of Education had a duty to monitor those cases, and they had not been doing their job. So eventually we had an agreement with the state as to how they would monitor those cases. So with that one case, I figure we must have saved the educational life of thousands of children who otherwise would never have gotten the education needed to graduate from high school and to go on to college.
The year I started with CRLA was 1966. As soon as I got the taste that CRLA has power to resolve injustices, to do away with injustices, you know, I got hooked on that. Originally, we came from Mexico. My father, my mother, and myself. You know, I worked in the fields. I came from the fields, so I know that job. I did the short haul myself. And so I said, and I know, for first experience, I know that it's terrible on your back because you have to be scooped working 10 hours a day, continuously almost, because if you stand up to rest, the foreman will then say, hey, bend down, bend down. So then I provided all that information to Mo. Mo at that time was being a young attorney, just got hired by CRLA, and he said, oh yeah, he says, this is bad. So he got a doctor from LA, world-renowned specialist, back specialist, and doctor testified and said the same thing. It's not natural for a human being to be in that position all day. They opposed it all the way, but finally went all the way to the Supreme Court of California. It was about 1969 when it started, and it ended in 1975 when the Supreme Court of the State of California decided to bend it. And the farm workers erupted into shouting and singing and all that stuff. And it was the most wonderful feeling because we went against a giant and we won. When I was working in Soledad, a mother came to the office with her young daughter. And she said that my daughter refuses to go to school. I asked her why, and she said, because we don't do nothing, we don't learn nothing, we just play. So I went and I talked to the superintendent. The superintendent said, by law, we are required to have the kids tested by the psychiatrist. And the ones that don't pass the test, that's why they're here. So what does that mean? He says, well, they score low on the IQ test. We decided, Mo and I, to go to the school board and explain to them the situation. And we were confident that once the board knew the real truth, that they were going to say, oh, no, let's do something. Especially when 2 Hispanics were on the board. And the board came back and said, you know, our hands are tied. So then Mo said, let's file a lawsuit against them. But also Department of Education for allowing this. If I remember right, Mo saying that 22,000 Spanish-speaking kids came out of those rooms throughout the state. Not only did CRLA empower the people, but it empowered the workers within CRLA also. Made us feel good, because we're doing good things for people.
Because it's a great honor for me to be here. And I'm going to share something with all of you. And that is, I believe that we are put on this earth with a purpose. Every one of us. And when a person finds a purpose in life, then we have to, like Jesus, my co-worker said, we have to bring back the salary that we earn, because it's a pleasure to help other persons in need. And I heard someone say, and I read someplace, somewhere, it says, I came to serve, not to be served. Somebody said that. And I fully concur with that person. Because in helping others, you receive joy. And the more you help, the more happy you are. That seems kind of funny, but that's the way it goes. You would think that 50 years of day in, day out, working, by this time I would be unconscious. But as you can see, I'm not. And I plan on keep on going until somebody else says that's it. Thank you very much.